You have been misled about weight loss for almost your entire life, and it's not your fault. From a young age, we've heard the same seemingly logical formula repeated over and over. Eat less, move more, and the fat will disappear. If you don't lose weight, you lack discipline. If you gain it back, you're weak. The body has been reduced to a simple calorie equation, and you've been made morally responsible for the outcome of that math. But the human body is not a calculator. It is a living, dynamic chemical laboratory, far more complex and intelligent than any calorie chart ever suggested. Inside that laboratory is a biological switch so powerful that it determines whether you burn fat or lock it away. And that switch is not calories, it's a hormone called insulin. Pause for a moment and reflect on your own experience. Have you ever followed a strict diet, drastically cut portions, skipped meals, even felt irritable from hunger, yet the scale barely moved? Have you pushed yourself through exhausting cardio sessions, run at 5 a.m., soaked your shirt in sweat, only to find that a few months later your weight returned to where it started? If you've lived through that cycle, the problem likely wasn't willpower. It was chemistry. Because when your insulin levels remain high, your body is simply not allowed to burn fat, no matter how large your calorie deficit looks on paper. Insulin is often introduced as a blood sugar hormone, but its true role is deeper and far more powerful. Insulin is the manager of your body's energy storage system. Imagine you have two fuel tanks. The first tank is glycogen-stored sugar in your liver and muscles, compact and easily accessible, like cash in your wallet. The second tank is body fat, massive, long-term storage, like a savings account you've been contributing to for years. When insulin is low, your body can flexibly draw energy from both tanks. But when insulin is high, your body shifts into deposit mode. Energy from food is sealed away and transferred into fat storage. More importantly, when insulin rises, it doesn't just promote fat storage, it locks the door to the fat tank. The exit is closed. The fat is there, but you cannot access it. This is the paradox millions of people live with every day. They carry tens of thousands of stored calories around their waist, yet they feel hungry, tired, craving, and low on energy. That is not laziness. That is not weakness. It is a biochemical state where your cells are denied access to their own reserves. When insulin remains chronically elevated, your body becomes trapped in a hormonal loop. You eat, insulin rises, fat gets locked away. Blood sugar then drops quickly, leaving you fatigued and craving more food. You eat again, insulin rises again. The cycle continues, and you blame yourself when in reality you are fighting biology. Most people focus only on what am I eating, but rarely ask, how am I eating, and what is this doing to my insulin? They snack throughout the day, a small pastry, a piece of fruit, a milky coffee, a snack bar, and assume that because each item is low in calories, it doesn't matter. But each time insulin is activated, it may not spike dramatically, but it rises slightly and repeatedly. Imagine your bank manager never leaves the office. The vault never opens. No money is ever withdrawn. That is exactly what happens when you eat 5, 6, even 7 times per day. So, is the solution to starve yourself? Absolutely not. The goal is not self-punishment. The goal is understanding the mechanism and using it intelligently. One of the most powerful yet simple tools I've applied with my patients is not changing what they eat, but changing the order in which they eat. When you sit down for a meal, your stomach does not separate foods. It mixes everything together and sends it to the small intestine. If the first bite you take is bread, white rice, pasta, or sweets, glucose is rapidly absorbed. Blood sugar spikes. The pancreas responds with a surge of insulin, and you are immediately pushed into fat storage mode. But if you reverse that order, everything changes dramatically. Start your meal with fiber. A large plate of salad, steamed vegetables, lightly sautéed greens with olive oil, broccoli, asparagus, spinach, any vegetables you enjoy. Fiber forms a kind of mesh in the gut, slowing down the absorption of sugar. Next, eat protein and healthy fats: eggs, salmon, chicken, beef, legumes, avocado. These foods stimulate hormones like GLP-1, helping you feel fuller for longer and slowing digestion. Only after that foundation is built should you eat your starch. The same portion of rice, the same slice of bread, but when they enter a digestive system that has already been slowed down, they no longer create a blood sugar tsunami. Instead, they become a gentle stream. Research shows that this eating sequence can reduce post-meal glucose spikes by up to 70% in some cases, even when total calories remain unchanged. What does this mean in real life? It means you can go out to dinner with your family without refusing everything on the table. You don't have to live in fear of carbohydrates. You just need to change your strategy. You don't have to become perfect, you just need to understand your body better. And when you realize the issue isn't how much you eat, but how insulin responds, you begin to regain control not through force, but through knowledge. This is only the beginning of a larger picture about how we can work with biology instead of fighting against it. Now let's talk about the trap most people don't even realize. They're caught in a trap invisible to the eye, but responsible for much of your daily eating behavior. The hormonal roller coaster of blood sugar and insulin. Picture a typical morning. You wake up rushed. Maybe you skip breakfast and grab a sweet coffee, or worse, a quick white bread sandwich, because there's no time. That first bite of refined carbohydrate is like pouring high-octane fuel into a sensitive engine. Blood sugar rises rapidly. The pancreas immediately responds with a strong surge of insulin to clear that glucose from the bloodstream. In that moment, you feel alert, slightly energized, maybe even uplifted. But what you don't feel is insulin quietly flipping the storage switch and locking away fat-burning capacity. The body shifts into deposit mode. Excess energy is pushed into fat cells. The real problem isn't the initial spike, it's the crash that follows. When insulin works quickly and aggressively, blood sugar can drop below a stable level. You begin to feel tired, foggy, unfocused. The first thought that appears is, I need something to wake me up. A snack bar, a milk tea, a cookie, and the loop begins again. This biochemical roller coaster is the reality for millions of people every day. A spike in the morning, a dip before lunch, afternoon sugar cravings, evening overeating because the body believes it's low on energy. If you've ever wondered why 3 p.m. always brings a craving for something sweet, even after a full lunch, the answer isn't that you're greedy. It's that your blood sugar is dropping after a previous insulin surge. When insulin spikes sharply, it not only moves glucose into cells, it also shuts the door on fat release, preventing your body from using stored energy to compensate. So you feel low on energy even though you're carrying plenty of it locked away. This is the painful paradox of modern metabolism. Energy stored in excess, yet energy unavailable for use. The trap becomes more dangerous when repeated throughout the day. Each time you eat fast carbohydrates or snack, insulin is activated again. It never has the opportunity to fall low enough for long enough to open the fat vault. Imagine your bank manager constantly in deposit mode, never allowing withdrawals. No matter how much money you have in savings, you're forced to borrow every time you need to spend. That's how your body behaves when insulin remains elevated. It cannot access stored fat, so it must seek new energy from food. You become hungry sooner, eat more frequently, and unknowingly reinforce the very trap holding you back. Many people believe that eating multiple small meals per day is good for metabolism. They're told to eat 5 or 6 times daily to keep blood sugar stable. But if those small meals contain carbohydrates or sugar, what you're really doing is keeping insulin quietly elevated all day long. It may not spike dramatically, but it never truly drops. And when insulin doesn't drop, the body cannot shift into fat-burning mode. You see this clearly in people who constantly carry snacks, eating every 2 hours out of fear of hunger. They rarely feel true hunger, but they also rarely feel light, clear-headed, or metabolically flexible. They live in a state of half full, half tired, while abdominal fat slowly accumulates. Think of an office worker sitting at a computer for 8 hours a day. Morning sweet coffee, mid-morning cookies, lunch with white rice and minimal vegetables, afternoon sugary drink, a large dinner because of fatigue. None of these choices may seem excessive in isolation, but together they create a chain of insulin spikes. The body remains in storage mode for most of the 16 waking hours. By nighttime, basal insulin hasn't truly dropped, and fat burning during sleep is limited. The next morning, hunger returns early even though fat stores remain full, and the cycle continues. This hormonal trap also distorts how people see themselves. They believe they lack willpower because they can't resist sweets, but when blood sugar drops quickly, the brain receives an emergency signal. It doesn't distinguish between "I want cake" and "I need survival fuel." It only knows glucose is falling and must be restored. In that state, cravings are not psychological weakness, they are survival reflexes. And each time you respond with quick sugar, you push insulin to a new peak, only to crash deeper afterward. The most important thing I want you to understand is this. If you don't correct the roller coaster pattern, every other weight loss effort is like pouring water into a bucket with holes. You can reduce portions. You can exercise more. But if insulin continues to fluctuate dramatically without extended periods at low levels, your body will keep fat locked away. And each failure will convince you that you're not good enough, when in reality, you're simply playing by the wrong biological rules. When you begin to view weight through a hormonal lens instead of a moral one, relief appears. You are not broken. Your body is not betraying you. It is doing exactly what chemistry instructs it to do. The issue is not discipline. The issue is that insulin is controlling the panel and no one taught you how to take it back. If the previous section described the waves of insulin rising after meals, now we need to look deeper at something quieter but even more decisive. Basal insulin. This is the background level of insulin your body maintains continuously in the bloodstream even when you're not eating, even while you sleep. Most people focus on insulin spikes after meals. But in clinical practice, what I observe in individuals with long-term excess weight is not necessarily extreme spikes. It's a baseline insulin level that remains chronically elevated. And when your baseline is high, you begin each day already in fat-locked mode. Imagine you go to bed at 11 p.m. and don't eat for 8 hours. Logically, this should be your strongest fat-burning window. But if your basal insulin remains elevated, that process is severely limited. The body doesn't truly shift into withdrawal mode from fat stores. So the next morning, instead of waking up light and clear, you wake up hungry, sometimes intensely so. Many people tell me, I don't understand how I can have so much fat stored and still wake up starving. The answer isn't how much fat you have, it's whether insulin allows you to access it. High basal insulin is like a vault door locked from the inside. You have fuel, but you don't have the key. And when the body can't access fat, it must rely on quick glucose. This creates dependency on carbohydrates and sugar. You lose metabolic flexibility. A healthy body can switch between glucose and fat depending on conditions. But when elevated basal insulin persists, that flexibility gradually disappears. You become sugar dependent. Go a few hours without eating and you feel fatigued, dizzy, irritable. That is not weakness. It is biology that has been conditioned in a specific direction. So why does basal insulin rise in the first place? The main cause is insulin resistance, a condition in which your cells gradually become less responsive to insulin's signal. Imagine insulin as someone knocking on a door. Under normal circumstances, a gentle knock is enough for the cell to open and allow glucose inside. But when you constantly consume high amounts of refined carbohydrates, snack all day, sleep poorly, and live under chronic stress, insulin has to knock far too often. Over time, the cells respond by reducing their sensitivity. The door doesn't open as easily as before. How does the body react? The pancreas starts knocking harder, meaning it releases more insulin to achieve the same effect. That is insulin resistance. Not a lack of insulin, but the need for more insulin to do the same job. In its early stages, insulin resistance is silent. Blood sugar levels may still fall within the normal range. Basic lab tests might not show anything obviously wrong. But beneath the surface, basal insulin is slowly rising. The pancreas works harder. Fat cells continue storing. The body gradually shifts into a storage priority state. You may not be eating excessively, yet your weight creeps up over time. Many people in their 30s and 40s tell me they eat less than they did in their 20s, yet gain weight more easily. That's not because metabolism has mysteriously slowed down. It's because insulin resistance has accumulated over years. Think again about the image of calloused skin. When you repeatedly rub one area of skin, the body protects itself by thickening it. Insulin resistance works in a similar way. When cells are repeatedly exposed to high insulin levels, they protect themselves by reducing sensitivity. At first, this is an adaptive mechanism, but when it persists, it becomes a problem. The higher insulin rises, the more resistant the cells become. The more resistant they are, the more insulin the pancreas must produce. The loop continues. The danger is that high insulin isn't just about belly fat. It's also linked to fatty liver, high blood pressure, abnormal lipid profiles, and metabolic syndrome. But for many people, the first noticeable sign is simply, "I can't lose abdominal fat anymore." One often overlooked driver of insulin resistance is stress and sleep deprivation. Cortisol, the stress hormone, raises blood glucose and indirectly stimulates insulin secretion. If you sleep too little, stay up late, or live in prolonged anxiety, your body remains in survival alert mode. In that state, the body prioritizes energy storage over fat burning. This explains why some people who don't eat terribly still accumulate belly fat during periods of chronic stress. Visceral fat, in particular, is highly sensitive to hormonal signals like cortisol and insulin. So insulin resistance isn't just a food story, it's a lifestyle story. The important thing to understand is that insulin resistance is not a life sentence. It is an adaptive process that can be reversed if you remove the friction that caused it. When you reduce the number of times insulin spikes during the day, flatten glucose peaks, and create long enough windows for insulin to fall, cells gradually regain sensitivity. Just as callous skin softens when friction stops, metabolic sensitivity can return over time. But this doesn't happen overnight. It requires consistency, not extremism, not starvation, not punishing workouts, but intelligent, steady strategy. As basal insulin begins to decline, you'll feel changes before you see them on the scale. You may go several hours without intense hunger. Afternoon sugar cravings diminish. Energy stabilizes. Sleep deepens. Gradually, your body begins to use stored fat again as a true fuel source. Many people describe this phase as, "I no longer feel like I'm fighting food." And that is the real goal, not forcing yourself through willpower, but restoring your biology so it works with you instead of against you. Now we arrive at the most important part, where understanding turns into action, where theory becomes practical strategy. If insulin is the switch that determines fat burning or fat storage, and insulin resistance is the biological callus that dulls metabolic signaling, then the only remaining question is, how do we untangle this intelligently, sustainably, and without extremes? The answer lies in 4 simple but powerful biological strategies not built on willpower, but on mechanism. This is not a new diet. It is a direct intervention into your chemistry. The first strategy is rearranging the order of eating, a small change with a significant impact on blood sugar and insulin. Most people begin meals with starch, white rice, bread, pasta, potatoes, then move to vegetables and protein. But if you reverse that sequence, you fundamentally change the post-meal biochemical response. When you start with fiber-rich vegetables, fiber forms a natural gel-like matrix in the gut, slowing gastric emptying and glucose absorption. Then, when you eat protein and healthy fats, the body releases GLP-1 and other satiety hormones, further slowing digestion and enhancing fullness. By the time starch enters the meal, it no longer floods the bloodstream like a wave. It trickles in gradually, like a steady stream. The meal is the same, the calories are the same, but the insulin response is dramatically different. You don't need to eliminate carbohydrates from your life. You simply need to change how you introduce them to your body. The second strategy is leveraging the power of acetic acid, the active component in vinegar, especially apple cider vinegar. It may sound simple, even old-fashioned, but the mechanism behind it is remarkably compelling. Acetic acid slows the activity of alpha amylase, the enzyme responsible for breaking down starch into glucose. When you consume a tablespoon of vinegar diluted in water before a meal, you temporarily reduce the speed at which carbohydrates are converted into sugar. This means glucose enters the bloodstream more gradually, blood sugar peaks are lower, and insulin doesn't need to rise as dramatically to manage the load. In addition, acetic acid has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity in muscle cells, helping them hear insulin's signal more clearly. Imagine insulin as a messenger and the cells as receivers. In insulin resistance, the receivers have poor hearing, so the messenger has to shout louder. Vinegar acts like a signal enhancer on the receiving end, allowing the body to respond effectively without requiring excessive insulin. This is not magic, it's a subtle adjustment that reduces friction within the system. The third strategy involves taking advantage of the golden window of movement, and this is where many people misunderstand metabolism. Most assume that if fat loss is the goal, you must burn as many calories as possible, which leads them to fasted morning runs or intense evening cardio sessions. But if the objective is insulin control and metabolic sensitivity, the most important time to move is actually right after eating. When you consume carbohydrates, glucose enters the bloodstream and needs somewhere to go. If you remain sedentary, insulin must do all the work of pushing glucose into cells. But when you take a gentle 10-15-minute walk after a meal, your muscles activate a special pathway called GLUT4, allowing them to absorb glucose directly with minimal reliance on insulin. You don't need to run. You don't need to sweat excessively. You simply need to use your muscles at the right time. Instead of forcing your body through willpower, you're drawing glucose out of the bloodstream through movement. This not only flattens blood sugar curves, but also sends a signal that cells should become more insulin sensitive over time. The fourth strategy is creating genuine digestive rest through time-restricted eating, typically within an 8-hour window each day. This is not extreme starvation. It is simply reducing the number of times insulin is triggered throughout the day. Every time you eat even a small bite, insulin rises. If you eat from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., your body rarely has a chance to lower insulin long enough to unlock fat stores. But when you consolidate meals into an 8-hour window, say from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., you create a 1-6-hour period during which insulin can fall to a lower baseline. It is during this window that the body begins true fat-burning processes. The key is combining this window with the previous 3 strategies. If you eat within 8 hours but constantly snack on refined carbohydrates, the effect will be limited. But when you eat strategically, sequence your meals correctly, support digestion with vinegar, move after meals, and then allow your body to rest, you are addressing the problem from multiple biological angles simultaneously. These 4 strategies do not require perfection. You don't need to count every calorie or eliminate every favorite food. What you are doing is reshaping your hormonal environment. You are flattening spikes, lowering baseline insulin, reducing friction, and restoring cellular sensitivity. When insulin is no longer chronically activated or excessively elevated, your body begins to remember how to use fat as a natural fuel source. And perhaps the most remarkable part is that you will feel the shift before the scale reflects it. Energy stabilizes. Cravings diminish. The space between meals feels comfortable rather than desperate. That is, when you know you are no longer fighting your body, you are collaborating with it through science and understanding. Now, imagine a very ordinary day in your life, not an idealized version from a wellness book, but a real day filled with work, responsibilities, family, and familiar temptations. You wake up in the morning, And instead of rushing to eat something out of fear of hunger, you give your body a few minutes to fully awaken. If you're not hungry, you don't need to eat immediately. That doesn't mean you're starving yourself. It means you're allowing basal insulin a little more time to decline. When true hunger appears, you begin your first meal not with starch, but with vegetables and protein. A plate of eggs with sautéed greens, salmon with salad, beans with leafy vegetables. You are sending your hormones a clear message at the start of the day. Today, we stabilize. We do not rush. At lunch, instead of eating rice first and touching the vegetables later, you reverse the order. Start with the vegetables. Chew a little more slowly. Give your stomach time to signal fullness. Then eat protein. Only afterward do you move to starch. You don't eliminate rice or bread if you enjoy them, you simply change how your body encounters them. Before dinner, you might mix a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar with water and sip it slowly, like a small ritual, reminding you that you are working with your biology. These actions don't require hours in the gym. They don't demand expensive specialty foods. They don't require dietary perfection. They are subtle adjustments repeated daily. After dinner, instead of collapsing onto the couch and scrolling through your phone unconsciously, you take a 10-15-minute walk, not to earn your meal, not to punish yourself, but to help your muscles absorb glucose from the bloodstream. Think of it as a metabolic cleanup step after eating. You are proactively opening a metabolic pathway instead of forcing insulin to manage everything alone. Those gentle steps may not leave you drenched in sweat, but biologically, they send a powerful signal that energy should be used, not stored. Confine meals to an 8-hour window, perhaps from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. You create a meaningful rest period for digestion and hormones. During that rest, insulin falls to a lower baseline, fat stores begin to unlock, and your body gradually relearns metabolic flexibility. The key is not treating this like a competition to see who can fast the longest. If one day you're genuinely hungry earlier, you adjust. The goal is not extremism, it is consistency. After a few weeks of applying these changes, you may begin noticing subtle signals. You no longer feel compelled to eat every 2 hours. The afternoon sugar crash fades. Mornings feel lighter, less frantic with hunger. These are signs that basal insulin is declining and insulin sensitivity is improving. The number on the scale may change slowly, but your metabolism is transforming internally. And that transformation is far more meaningful than any rapid fluctuation. What I want you to carry with you after all this discussion about insulin, insulin resistance, and biological strategies is not a rigid list of rules. I want you to carry a shift in how you see yourself. If you've ever blamed yourself for not losing fat, if you've ever felt like you were not strong enough, pause here. Your body is not betraying you. It is simply responding to the hormonal environment you unintentionally created. When you change that environment, your body changes with it. Weight loss has never been a moral test. It is not a competition of willpower. It is a story of biological signals, of molecules and hormones. Food is not just energy, it is information. Every bite is a command sent to insulin, to fat cells, to the liver, to muscle tissue. Once you understand that, you no longer look at meals through fear or guilt. You see them as opportunities to adjust the system. You don't need to be 100% perfect to see results. You just need to improve slightly each day. Start by changing the order of your meals. Add a 10-minute walk after dinner. Reduce unconscious snacking. Create space for your body to rest. These may sound small, but biologically they compound. Over time, the callus of insulin resistance begins to thin. Cells start hearing the signal again. Fat stores unlock. Energy stabilizes. You are no longer living on a blood sugar roller coaster. If there is one thing I want you to remember, it is this. You are not the problem. The lack of understanding about hormones is the problem. When you are given the right information, you can make smarter decisions. And when you work with your biology instead of against it, you don't just change your weight, you change your relationship with your body. Look at your next meal as a small experiment in your personal laboratory. You are the chemist. You hold the control panel. And every choice, no matter how small, moves you closer to a more flexible, healthier, and freer body.